October 1944. The Pacific burned as Allied armadas returned to the Philippines. Douglas MacArthur's vow, "I shall return," was no mere slogan. It was prophecy. The Philippines were more than islands. They were the artery of Japan's empire, the route through which oil, rubber, and resources from Southeast Asia flowed north. If Leyte fell, the empire would choke. The Americans knew it. The Japanese knew it. The ocean between them was about to erupt. MacArthur's landing was both drama and necessity. Convoys of men and machines crossed dark seas, waves breaking over decks, every sailor whispering about the gamble ahead. Veterans of Bataan, men who had been driven into death marches years before, stepped onto the beaches with vengeance in their hearts. Landing craft opened under shell fire. Sand turned black as machine gun bullets swept the surf. Chaplains blessed the wounded while medics tore strips of cloth to bind bleeding arms. Behind them, the rumble of naval guns shook the very horizon. The Japanese response was desperate. Operation Shogo. 4 thrusts of the Imperial Navy would converge like blades on Leyte. A northern force of carriers, nearly empty of aircraft, would act as bait, tempting Admiral Halsey into pursuit. The center force, monstrous battleships including Yamato and Musashi, would push through San Bernardino Strait to strike the beaches. A southern force advanced on Surigao Strait, aiming to crush the invasion fleet in a pincer. It was bold, suicidal, and final. Japan could not replace these ships. If they failed here, the Imperial Navy would die. On October 24th, the Sibuyan Sea became an execution ground. Waves of American Hellcats, Avengers, and Helldivers swooped down, bomb racks clattering, torpedoes slicing water. Their target was Musashi, a floating fortress with armor thicker than any shell could easily pierce. She took them all. Bombs that turned steel decks into craters, torpedoes that ripped open hull plates, explosions that sent fireballs climbing into the sky. She refused to sink, her 18-inch guns still thundering against enemies she could not touch. Hours later, after 17 bombs and 20 torpedoes, she finally capsized, dragging more than 1,000 sailors beneath an ocean smeared black with burning oil. Survivors floated, their skin blistered, some blinded, clinging to debris while sharks circled. That night, Surigao Strait flared into history's last classic battleship duel. American battleships, many resurrected from the ruins of Pearl Harbor, waited like executioners. Their radar tracked the advancing Japanese column. Destroyers launched torpedoes, cruisers opened fire, then battleships crossed the enemy's T. Shells the size of cars smashed into Yamashiro until she was nothing but flame. Survivors in the water saw her bow rise, guns still firing as the sea consumed her. One sailor recalled the water glowing red from fires that floated like burning rivers. It was the end of an era. Never again would great battle lines clash with steel and shot in the night. But the true crucible came at Samar. At dawn on October 25th, Kurita-S Center Force burst from San Bernardino Strait and bore down on Taffy 3, 6 tiny escort carriers and a screen of destroyers. Against Yamato, Congo, Nagato, and a dozen heavy cruisers, they had no chance. Yet they turned to fight. The USS Johnston charged first, Captain Ernest Evans roaring, "This is a fighting ship. I intend to go in harm's way." Guns spat flame, torpedoes hissed, and shells smashed into her hull. Men were ripped apart, decks shattered, compartments flooded, yet Johnston kept firing until she broke in two. Hull followed, riddled until her boilers burst, scalding crew alive in white-hot steam. Samuel B. Roberts, a mere destroyer escort, lunged into battle like a wolf among lions. Her gunners fired until barrels glowed red, blasting shells into cruisers until the sea swallowed her too. Survivors swore the ocean itself ran red with blood and oil, smoke curling over waves like a shroud. Above, carrier pilots made suicide runs without ordnance, diving low just to strafe decks and scatter Japanese fire. Some pilots dropped depth charges, meant for submarines, on armored cruisers, anything to slow them. From above, they saw bodies catapulted into the air by near misses, arms and legs sheared away by steel fragments. On the carriers, young sailors prayed as Yamato's 18-inch shells fell like meteors, each blast shaking decks so violently that men fell to their knees. Medics tied tourniquets with strips of clothing, their hands slick with blood. For hours, the Americans fought with fury far beyond their weight. Smoke screens hid the carriers. Destroyers bled themselves dry. Finally, Kurita faltered. Believing he had stumbled into a trap, fearing Halsey's main fleet lurked nearby, he ordered retreat. Giants turned away from minnows. Against all logic, Taffy 3 had survived. To the north, Halsey's third fleet fell upon the decoy carriers. Off Cape Engano, waves of American planes descended. The Zuikaku, last survivor of Pearl Harbor, burned and rolled, flames devouring her deck. Carriers Chitos, Chiyoda, Zuiho followed her down. Japanese sailors leapt into oil fires, their screams vanishing beneath the surf. It was the death of Japan's carrier arm. From this day forward, Japan's skies would belong to the Allies. By the battle's end, Japan had lost 4 carriers, 3 battleships, 10 cruisers, and 11 destroyers, nearly 30 ships, and thousands of sailors. The Americans lost several small ships and hundreds of brave men. Yet the invasion was saved. The Philippines were on their way to liberation. The stories of survival were seared into memory. Sailors spoke of decks slick with blood, of men with arms torn away still loading shells, of the screams of the scalded echoing in boiler rooms. Johnston's survivors remembered their captain's last words, "a fighting ship." Others described sharks circling lifeboats, dragging men under as oil fires burned around them. On carrier decks, wounded men were bandaged with strips torn from uniforms, medics working until their hands cramped from blood. Pilots with empty racks feigned attack runs to frighten enemy gunners, sometimes diving so close that the spray of Japanese shells rattled their cockpits. In Surigao Strait, wreckage floated for days. Survivors clung to rafts, their bodies blistered, lips cracked, eyes staring blankly into the night sky. One American sailor wrote later that the sea reeked of gasoline, oil, and burned flesh, and that he never again could eat roast meat without gagging. Another spoke of pulling a shipmate aboard only to realize he was already dead, eyes open, skin charred black. Strategically, Leyte marked the death knell of the Imperial Navy. Japan could never again mount a major naval offensive. From now until surrender, the Empire fought in retreat. For the Allies, Leyte was proof that courage could defy odds, that small ships could stare down titans and prevail. For historians, it was the last great convulsion of naval war, the twilight of battleships and the dawn of air power. Today, memorials dot the Philippines. Rusting hulks lie in shallow waters. Stone markers rise on beaches. Veterans and descendants still lay wreaths on waves that once drank men by the thousand. Their silence is testimony enough. Leyte Gulf was not merely a victory. It was a requiem. The sea itself became a graveyard, swallowing ships, men, and an empire's last hope.